Inside Number 9 is one of those shows that I tell every writer to watch. You don't even need to binge the whole thing, just pick a few random episodes, sit back with a cup of tea and enjoy. You'll learn a lot. Because although not every episode is a masterpiece, I'm sorry, but Last Gasp is dreadful, it understands the anthology structure better than most. So here are 5 things Inside Number 9 gets right and why other shows like Black Mirror and American Horror Story sometimes pale in comparison. This is Inside Number 9, creating the perfect anthology. An anthology series is a TV show or sometimes radio show that tells a self-contained story every episode or season. They are a collection of stories that don't, or at least really shouldn't, interconnect. However, to make sure each episode or season fits under the same brand and so an audience knows roughly what to expect, there is usually a common link between each tale. Sometimes it's genre, such as horror, sometimes it's theme, sometimes it's the host, such as Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and other times it's a setting. Inside Number 9's is pretty simple, it's always set around the number 9. In the first series, this was pretty much always the house number, but as the series went on, they got more experimental. Suddenly it was a size 9 shoe, art galleries, the floor number of a hotel. Whatever twisty story they had conjured up in their little gremlin minds, the number 9 was going to feature one way or another. Some people will argue that each episode is connected through genre, with many of the stories blending horror and comedy together, however that doesn't fit for every story, the 9 is the common ground. What's genius about this simple premise/gimmick is that it grounds them in some ways, meaning that most episodes must take place in one setting, but also allows them the complete freedom when it comes down to the actual bones of the story. The genre, the tone, the theme can shift and change each episode. They're basically a collection of independent short films wrapped up in a big number 9 blanket. Other anthologies don't have this much freedom, and that's fine. Shows such as True Detective and Fargo are very much cemented in the crime genre. They can shift slightly in tone and execution, but a whole series set in a karaoke booth probably wouldn't win them many awards. What the fuck was that noise? It's all about what your audience expects. If it's a crime genre, they expect a big old crime. Where Number 9 keeps things a bit more vague. Audience expect a laugh or two, a creepy moment now and again, and a 9 to pop up somewhere throughout, but other than that, we're happy to be taken wherever the story leads us. This is where many anthology shows slip up big time. The rules of an anthology are simple, standalone stories, may that be episodes or seasons, and yet unfortunately it's pretty common to see this rule broken. Because over time, as a show continues on for 4, 6 or however many seasons, the writers can get stuck or lazy and sometimes a bit too clever for their own good. And suddenly everything's connecting and linked in the most stupid and ridiculous ways. American Horror Story is the absolute worst offender of this butchered storytelling technique. The first few seasons got it right. They're not perfect stories, far from it, but they're new and intriguing each time. The setting changes, the characters change, tonally it switches from being pretty dark and depressing to camp and wild, and then as time goes on, suddenly Sarah Paulson is playing 3 or 4 characters within the same fucking season. And most of the time these are characters from previous years of the show. Suddenly, an audience is expected to have watched every previous season to understand what the hell is going on, or to at least give a shit. If you haven't seen Coven, then Apocalypse will mean fuck all to you, why should you care? Now fans will always try to connect the stories, people do that with Pixar films, but leave that to the fans. That's something they can discuss when it's off air. Stop pandering to the... What the fuck is that noise? Stop pandering to the Tumblr nonsense and instead focus on telling a rich and intriguing story full of new thrills and horrifying creations. Personally, I think the same for sequel and prequel episodes, mainly because usually they're not needed. An anthology story shouldn't really lend itself to either. The story should be told and wrapped up in a satisfying way the first time. It shouldn't require a follow-up. Black Mirror has started experimenting with sequels and returning ideas. In the same season we get the USS Callister sequel and a story set in the same universe as Bandersnatch. And it annoys me because now when a story ends with an open ending, people are crying out for a follow-up rather than sitting with that uncertainty that the writer wanted to leave you with. Inside Number 9 understands the anthology format. There are no sequels to stories throughout the entire season. The closest we get is a crossover with one of their previous shows, Psychophil, and I think that's one of their weaker outings because of it. But other than that, they stick to the formula they chose. They don't give up the challenge of creating new worlds and characters each week, instead they embrace it. They're constantly pushing themselves in new and interesting directions. Sure, they could have easily done a follow-up to Nana's Party, but instead they told a Shakespeare comedy in a hallway. Also, I think when you start looking back to previous stories, it can feel a little bit desperate, as if you're wanting to recapture the magic that once worked because now you're not so confident enough to just move forward. True Detective sometimes suffers with this. All these nods to season 1 only reminds me just how strong that first season was. It didn't need a shared universe or not so subtle Easter eggs, it just needed a razor sharp script and a fabulous creative team. You may not be a fan of every Inside Number 9 episode, I know I'm certainly not, but the one thing you can never say about Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pembleton is that they're lazy. They are always pushing themselves, which is just such a treat for an audience to witness. When working with, or just talking to writers, sometimes they will tell me this wonderful idea they've got, and I don't mean that sarcastically, sometimes it really is a great gripping concept they're working on. However, after 10 minutes of explaining the intricacies of their plot, sometimes I'm left wondering, what about the people? Or if it's animation, the animals and the robots, the characters, that's what they're called. And more importantly, how does this concept affect them? Because an idea is one thing, but a story is another. If you have this idea for a show that has a time traveling microwave, great, you have a concept, but you don't have anything that can actually be told yet. Characters are everything. Without characters reacting throughout the plot, you just have a series of events, scenes that have no real meaning or structure. We as an audience connect to characters, they're the reason we get invested in stories to see what happens to them next. Even in fantasy, you may love the world of Westeros and Hogwarts, but take the characters, the people that populate that world out of it, and suddenly it's a shell of what it was. Characters are everything. And Inside Number 9 gets this from the off, even just explaining some episodes in a single sentence reveals this. The one where the family plays sardines, one with the comedians, the one where her life flashes before her eyes, the one with the witchfinders. These are just Friends episodes now. Characters at the centre of the idea, everything is about those people. Black Mirror used to be really good at this. The early ones were very much focused on how technology affects us. The tech was the gimmick, but the story, the heart of each tale, were the characters that were forced to interact with it. However, more recent episodes feel as if they're more interested in the weird, isn't this scary technology than actually getting me invested with the people on screen. Not every episode, there are still some amazing stories from the newer seasons, but nothing has moved me like it used to in the early years. The Hayley Atwell episode is still one of my favourites from the entire show. Inside Number 9 only has 30 minutes to introduce its concept and characters, tell a good story, and wrap it up by the end. And yet, more times than not, I am invested in the people I've been watching. I've laughed, I've related to them, I've hated them, I've felt for them. Some episodes are incredibly moving and will affect an audience member in a way that most shows would need a series or two to do. And again, I'm not saying every episode of Inside Number 9 is perfect, but I find it interesting that for me at least, the ones I dislike the most are the ones where I don't connect or feel some way towards the characters. Or where the concept takes over the entire thing, such as Thinking Out Loud, which quite honestly is probably the worst episode of the show. We'll talk about that more when I do my ranking video, because fuck me, that's a mess. Another great lesson writers can learn from this show is how to use a format's freedoms to your advantage. As I said before, due to Inside Number 9's pretty loose gimmick, it allows the creators to explore many different genres and ideas. However, if you're writing an anthology that's purely about romance, let's say, it doesn't mean you can't experiment with the overall feeling of each story. For example, if it is a romance anthology you're working on, one could be inspired by rom-coms in the 90s, while another could venture into gothic romance territory. If it's set in a nightclub, what vibe do you want to create? Is it very much a party, bright lights and pulsing music, or is it seedy, sweaty and dark? All of this will completely change your entire story and offer an audience a very different atmosphere. Number 9 is incredibly good at this and usually establishes tone within the first few minutes. You know whether you're in for a gothic tale or a more comedic romp from the very beginning. And then, throughout the episode, Shearsmith and Pembleton continue to be playful with this tone, disarming the audience with jokes before offering a gut punch and occasional bloody ending. It's one of the reasons I think American Horror Story has suffered in recent years. The show has become very much known for its camp, stylized aesthetic and tone, and unfortunately, I think it's ran on far too long without changing things up that it's become incredibly predictable and stale. Like, yeah, they change the setting each season, but that change should come with a whole new atmosphere, a new style of storytelling. They refuse to really indulge in the horror genre, instead sticking constantly to the familiar pulpy beats. Give us a pure gothic, bloody love story, give us a full-on hammer horror, give us psychological torment, and strip away the campness and the pulpness sometimes and really let moments sit. Catch your audience completely off guard. Horror is all about suspense and shock. The audience shouldn't know what's coming next, let alone be able to play trope bingo. The Inside Number 9 episodes, Nana's Party, Love's Great Adventure, and Last Night at the Proms all feature a family getting together, and yet they are all so different in style, tone and story beats that nothing feels too familiar. Each story is its own unique thing, and that's what an anthology should be, definitely if each episode is a new tale. It's why I'm a defender of American Horror Story Roanoke. Yes, it falls off at the end, and it can be pretty uneven throughout, but I applaud them for trying something different. There's a unique style to this season that other seasons just don't have. And listen, I'm not a fan of found footage usually, but I think it's ballsy they tried it. I don't know why they refuse to experiment like this more often. They have a much bigger budget than Inside Number 9 ever had, and yet Inside Number 9 seemed to push itself at every opportunity. Now this last point isn't just for anthologies, but for every TV show and film franchise ever, apart from Doctor Who. Long live Doctor Who! Most things aren't meant to run and run, and personally I think the same goes for anthology projects. There could be hundreds of Inside Number 9 episodes. Nothing, apart from budget and scheduling and all that nonsense, is stopping them from going mad and making 20 episodes per season. However, just because you can do everything and anything doesn't always mean you should. 6 episodes per season, 9 seasons and done. And to be honest, that's a lot for British telly. We are known for liking our short shows. If you're working on an anthology series, may that be a TV script or a collection of short stories and poems, ask yourself, would you publish this alone? Would this one make a good one-off? And if the answer is no, if you're only doing it because you can hide it between a few other entries, you could and probably should scrap it. 5 amazing short tales is going to seem a lot better and more impressive if it doesn't have another 10 weaker ones thrown in. I want to discuss Inside Number 9 on the channel more because I really do think it's a treasure trove for a writer. You can learn so much from this ridiculous show. Like I said, I will do a full ranking of all the episodes. I probably have some controversial opinions, and also some very basic ones too. Sorry, but 12 Days of Christine is a masterpiece. I know everyone says it, but it's true, though it's not top of the list. Plus, there are so many anthology shows I haven't mentioned during this, either because I don't know enough about them to confidently talk about it, or I just haven't seen it. The big one that hasn't even had a look in is The Twilight Zone, but that's because I want to do a whole video on that one day. Also, if you're interested in more writing videos, please do let me know. I would love to do some deep dives into screenplays, break down why they work on the page and stuff. That's like a fucking drug to me. And lastly, one final 6th tip to learn from Inside Number 9, something that they do which you definitely shouldn't. Every story does not need a joke about shit.
Still, here it comes.
It's not flushed. I can't make it flush.
I'm sorry, that stinks. Shitting Nora! Try.
I'll give it a minute before you go in there.
And what is that smell?